Hi there, folks. Thank you for joining me. If you are watching this or listening to this or wherever you are receiving this information, please do consider liking and subscribing, because today I'm going to be telling you all about your website and a specific bit, which is an MOT checklist, like an actual checklist of stuff that you might want to consider when you have those meetings. So if you're looking to meet every month or 3 months, 6 months, 3 months is quarter, 6 months, and every year. Typically in most places I've worked, we've pulled together a kind of a information point, which is a report of what we are doing and how things work. So what I would suggest is that we do the same thing here. So I'm going to be talking you through this particular MOT checklist. If this is of interest, then please do consider hitting the like button or following me, and let's get straight into this. So the first thing here to notice is, other than I've branded it, is that this particular document that I'm going to be talking about is something that I made for a workshop called Good Web, Bad Web. If you have been on it, then you'll know exactly you already have a copy of this, as well as you'll know how it fits into the entire talk. The basic premise of this form for me is that I want you to understand how things work on your website. And often people come to me with issues around domain hosting and a billion other stuff. What's key is that people don't forget or lose sight of certain things. So if you're starting a website and you've got hosting and you think, this is my bandwidth, I don't really care, it doesn't interest me. Well, this is the place now where you would record all of that information. So it does help you to have that information available in that sense. So looking at this particular form, you would put your website down, you'd put your CMS type. So I would put WordPress. It could be Joomla, it could be Spotify, it could be Weebly or a site builder. It could be literally whatever it is that you use. Then the company that you use, for me, I use SiteGround and when you bought it. So this would vary from person to person, obviously. And this is something that I would say for the entire document here, is that when you're doing this MOT checklist, you don't need to mimic and copy this all the way through. What you could do is actually say, I'm going to recreate it and I'm going to edit certain bits, and that's entirely fine for you to do that. So when we're looking at this particular website and we're looking at what date it was bought, that's really interesting, because it then gives you that understanding of when it would renew. But instead of leaving that box, that's what's on the page. So now you can see, it renews on this date. So that's really cool. I'm going to go down the first column first, the left column, and then the right hand side column. So what we can see here is basic elements. So within basic elements, we've got the domain, the hosting, and the idea is that we know if we've passed or failed on it, as in if we've got access or not. So it's nothing too fancy initially at this stage. We're just looking at if the CMS, for example, is up to date. As I use WordPress, there are regular updates, so this does tick the box for that. But there might be other updates that are coming soon for other versions of whatever you use as well. And users with access validated basically means you could add information there about different people who have administration or high-level access to your website. And that's really important to understand for GDPR, as well as for safety and security for your website. Especially if you've got e-commerce and you've got other details on there too. Domain forwarding is something where people might adopt that. So instead of going to one website, you go to this domain and it takes you to a different domain. And it's worth considering if that's something that you do or not. So then we're looking at brand. And I think these are, when we're talking about brand and identity and stuff, you might feel like it doesn't fit this area, but it does. The brand could be a logo or fav icon. So in that case, what we're looking at is on the new tab, we've got the little icon that sits in new tabs. This is just there to go, it's a reminder. So for some people, you've already got it, so you don't care. If you're starting a new website, then this is going to be something that you do care about. Brand guidelines, this is a booklet, something that you got as a guide that styles your entire thing. Have you got one together, and is it adhered to? The next section talks about key items on the page or as a page. So on your website, you have key items. The key items might be a page, or it might be as a page, or it might be on a page. I understand that might be confusing, but when we have a look at these different elements, you'll kind of understand what it is that I'm talking about. So the first thing is, when you design a homepage, there's a certain way to design it, like top fold, and you've got trust issues as well. So the trust things might be more interactive than the other sections. So we've got Google Business, Trustpilot, any interactive review telling. So we've also got certifications. So if you've got quality marks, things that you've achieved. So if you've got marketing, CIM, chartered marketing kind of degree or qualification, then that's really important to tell people that you've got that. If you've been in the newspapers, whatever the trust values might be. Case studies is something where you've got quotes or references to actual people that have bought what you've done. And it's really important to have this info there. These are key items about your vision and items and stuff like that. Your vision, mission, values is really, really important to have. That information is valuable. I would say having a contact page or having some form of contact is really important. This is where I would also say, if you don't align with that, then you can remove that section. And that's the same across everything on this entire MOT. You are able to edit this document if you want to. I'm not precious about it in that sense. What a lot of people forget is to add GDPR or company's house or any kind of company information. It is important to add that. Whether it's to the footer or not, you still need a tick box to say you've done it. The next section is data and strategy. If you need data and strategy, well, everyone has it on their website. But the question is, do you have it set up? Have you reviewed it? So Google Analytics does need periodically looking at, so you might change that to review, ? And then we're looking at bounce or organic growth. So bounce rate is when people come to your site and go. Organic growth is when you get growth. It's just natural. The opposite to organic would be paid. So actually, maybe paid needs to be on there too. So I'm not sure. That kind of depends on you and how you're managing your website. Goal setting is interesting because goal setting relates to this section of key elements. So if you've got certain goals and key pages that are cornerstones is a term that you might reference to use key pages of a website. Without them, you wouldn't have a full website. Without that blog post, page's site is fine and we don't really care about it, but a cornerstone really gives it that grounding of, oh, we've got that bit of info, and it really does help people understand within your organization, or help you as a business owner understand what's the most important valuable assets in your business. Next things to consider thinking about under this section of data and strategy are if you've got problems. So are there any issues with the website? And you will maybe say no, but we might then want to look at if you've got broken links, if you've got 404 errors. This is where I turn you over to Google Search Console and say you need to have a look at Google Search Console, because they are the ones that will be able to tell you all about that. That's kind of up to you if you want to do that. I would do that, and I would then plan and action sort of some of those changes because it's really important that you have a site that's healthy. Just to remind you again, this MOT checklist does come from a workshop I've delivered called Good Web, Bad Web. So the reason for this is purely because we want you, or I want you, to utilize tools that make your website good or excellent and amazing. And the only way to do that is to look technically as well as visually. Site structure, navigation, 2 levels deep. This is a suggestion. The next bit that you want to be checking on your website is if you do have a navigation bar. You should do, obviously. But also if you have it really deep. So if you've got content that's 3 or 4 levels down, what that means is you've got on your navigation bar, you've got tab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Under tab 1, you'll have page 1, page 2. And then under page 2, you've got page 2, sub 3, sub 4. And then the tree structure diagram of that actual page is more than 2 levels because it goes beyond the navigation. You should really have your navigation bar that takes you to a page, and if it's got hover, it could go to another page, and that's it. That would say it's maybe one too many. Google does like you to have everything kind of served immediately, so that's why a lot of people tend to go to blog posts. So the next thing is a technical term, URL slugs. They're both actually technical terms that mean very similar things. If you go to your browser and you're visiting a certain web page, whatever's in your browser is the website address. So that's what we call the URL, the link. And some people also in the web world, we call them slugs, because when you create a post, the post that you post title should typically be the same title of the link. And the link that we give it is called a slug. So it's worth making sure that your URLs and tree structure or your site structure architecture is sound. I think the reason why I've got clear navigation here is because clear navigation implies that it is clear visually, and people often forget about mobile testing. So you do need to test your mobile as well and make sure it is responsive in that sense. Also, clear navigation sometimes isn't very clear. So doing this MOT helps you come back to that and ask questions. Also helps you identify if your cornerstones are still relevant, and also if your breadcrumbs, if you need breadcrumbs or not, and if you've got them, if there are any use, or if you've got problems with them. Typically, I'd say breadcrumbs are only really applicable more towards that e-commerce side where you are buying online. So when you're looking at clothes shopping, they tend to have breadcrumbs, or if you go on Amazon, you've got a subsection upon subsection because people like to look at very specific items within your shop. So they would use breadcrumbs. And then when you look at your top and you've got this with the arrow, then the arrow, then the arrow, then you've got an actual breadcrumb there. So that breadcrumb needs to be thought out sometimes, and the structure of it. Homepage, make sure you follow the rules. So the rules for this, I'm just going to mention it in a nutshell, but they're well covered in my Good Web, Bad Web workshop. And the rules are basically have your top third, having that text, header with text, CTA, which is your call to action with other information, and all of that in your top fold. Having your trust signals, your brand signals, also having key feeds. So some of these other things might require to have reasons for why people want to be on your website. The reasons might be key benefits. So these are really kind of important areas on your website. And just make sure you're following those rules, as well as, which is kind of website rules, but also follow your brand guidelines and things like padding and stuff like that. Call to action, already mentioned that. I'll ask the question again because it's explicitly not listed anywhere, and this is the one place to say you need to have it. Mobiles and loading hacks are basically to use Google Search Console, and you can use Google Search Console for a bunch of other stuff I've mentioned, but this is definitely in order to get web page loading a little bit faster and to get mobile moving, and for responsive sites, it's important to have Google Search Console, but within that you can also do Google page speed tests, so you can then do that test and see how fast your website is loading. It will then tell you what your first content painful is, and that's how long it takes for you to dial that in and get that first page loaded. So that's really important to nail that down. And another bit that you might want to consider is sitemap and the success of the sitemap. This is irrelevant, just needs a health check, or maybe not at all, and you just tick the box if it's an existing website. But if you are actually starting a new website, what I recommend you do is go online, find a XML site builder that's completely free. Just go and search for one, get the XML site, edit the whatever other stuff out of it. If you're okay with coding, if not, just take the file and put it up in the land of Google Search Console, and then you will start to rank. After 6 months, you need to be making sure that that's been removed and you've got a more up-to-date version on there. And that would usually be automatically created on WordPress if you have a tool like Yoast. So SEO. In terms of SEO, we need to be looking at cornerstones. I have touched on this briefly, but cornerstones are your key 2 or 3 bits. In this MOT, what we've not done is said that you need to have cornerstones yet. We're just making you aware of it. This is the explicit search engine optimization technical area of, do you have a cornerstone? Have you identified 4 of them or whatever they might be? Have you actually optimized them, given that they are the most important parts of your website? 2 ways of doing that is to run them through Yoast on WordPress, or if you don't have WordPress, use a tool like Hummingway. Schema is another area where you can do this really well with Yoast on WordPress, but you can also do on other tools and platforms. Look at the way things are laid out. And if you've got great ranking and then it's got your title and then it's got 3 pages or 2 and then 2, then what that shows you is that Google's ranking you and it's seeing lots of traffic going to your website, but at the same time, you need to be aware of that Google is promoting these individual pages which have been identified as your keystone and are now more important than they've ever been. That entire structure is called schema. So it's a little bit wordy in some ways. It's really good to have your schema correct or just to be aware of it. It's kind of up to you what your objectives are. I can't make that for you. Internal page links. This is more a case of if you have them, if you're aware of them, or if you need them, and just understanding how that sits in the land of backlinks. If you link to other pages, it's also really worth me identifying that you do need to consider what those links are, how they work, if they're organic in search or if they're related well. If you're knowledge sharing as well, really, really important stuff. So it's worth knowing what links you're getting out and what might be coming back to you as well. Image optimized basically means 2 things. So the first one, when you drag and drop your image and you start using it, before you do that, you do need to rename that file. In particular, if it's logo, give it the name logo with your business name, space logo. Often we use dashes in digital to separate the words rather than spaces. Spaces has no code, so the code understands what a line is, which is fine. So you think of renaming that file if it's an image and then putting it up. And then when you do it, add your alt description, your caption, your description, and your title if you've not done that or it asks you to do it again. And make sure it's filled out. Even on a basic level, you can cheat, copy and paste your title. At least do that. 2, the web is an ever-changing platform. Coming back to website pages and mobile, this particular bit where it asks you to optimize, what you can do is optimize the file size of what you've got. So your image might be so many megabytes. Straight away, I would say try and keep it in kilobytes. So the next thing to take a look at would be the file format. Typically I use JPEGs and I use PNGs. I prefer PNGs, but that doesn't mean you can't use either. There is a new one in town and people aren't aware of this, but if you're a technical kind of expert, you would know WebPs are really light file sizes and they use 20% of the overall typical file size. So the compression rate on it is amazing. Run up by Google, really, really worthwhile starting to use. If you're sharing images, don't use that because people won't know what it is. But if you're just using it for the website, then do use WebP, that's fine. Keyword analysis. So if you don't use tools like Keyword Everywhere on Chrome or on Edge, then you should do. The entirety of this test does allow you to do quite a lot. So hopefully you've taken away a lot from this. And I hope this makes sense. If for any reason it doesn't, or that I've skipped over a section, it's left a grey area and it's left more comments, then please do comment and leave your comments here. You can put them here, wherever you are. You could put them on Twitter. So yeah, I'm happy to answer more questions or create other content that might support you more. I wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to attendees from the Unlimited workshop, and thank you to Unlimited for continuously getting me back in to run these digital sessions. I genuinely love them. Until next time, guys, thank you for joining. Take care. See you soon.